Are you ready to run a larger tire and have more ground clearance? Well, today we're going to show you how to install this 6-inch lift kit on this Honda Pioneer 1000. So let's get to it. The first thing we're going to do is go ahead and remove our front wheels and tires from both sides. We've already done this, so we're going to go ahead and jump in and start removing our suspension components here. The first thing you're going to want to do is remove your cotter pin from your castle nut. We've already done this, and all of our hardware is already loosened for demonstration purposes. So we'd go ahead and we'd remove our castle nut. Once the castle nut's removed, you're going to want to go over here to your brake caliper and remove it as well. Hold your brake caliper, you grab it, just flip it out of the way. All of our brake line clips are already removed as well, so any portion of the A-arm that there's a brake line fastener, just go ahead and remove that at this time. And we just go ahead and we'd wiggle our hub right off like that, and we'll set it aside. And then we're going to come over here to our tie rod. We're going to take an 18mm socket. We'll go ahead and we'll remove our cotter pin first, and then we'll remove our castle nut. Just like that. Then if your tie rod end gets stuck to your steering arm here on your knuckle, what you can do is you can take a hammer and hit it right on the steering arm until it frees it up. Ours is freed up because, like I said, we've already went ahead and loosened all our hardware. So once we have our tie rod removed, we're going to go ahead and get a ratchet strap. I like to tie it around the cage, just like this. Get it ready to go. We'll remove our shock from our upper A-arm. We'll just go ahead and relieve the tension off the shock. Let our A-arms drop down. And then we'll go ahead and hook our ratchet strap into our upper A-arm. I like to kind of pick up on it. Pull your shock out of the way. Pick up on it like this. Once we have our upper A-arm tied up just like this, what we'd do, we'd come in here, remove our cotter pin from our upper ball joint. As you can see, we've already done that. And then we just go ahead and remove the nut. Once we've done that, we'd let our knuckle come down. We'd grab our axle. We can let that lower A-arm hang. And we're just going to go ahead and remove the axle. That way it's not hanging. So in each A-arm kit you're going to see, you're going to have some steering stops in there. If you'd like to install them, all you'd have to do is pull your boot back, just like this. Just pull it down, slide it down your tie rod, and you're going to see there's an inner rack shaft. So right here behind your inner ball and socket, you're going to see there's an inner shaft of the rack. You just take your steering stop and pop it right over that shaft. Today we're not going to be installing them on this machine, so we're going to continue on to the next step. Then what we're going to do is take an extension with an impact and then remove the lower ball joint from the knuckle. So we've removed our hardware. Then, like I said, all of our hardware is pretty much loose from just us mocking it up for demonstration purposes. This ball joint will be stuck in the knuckle here. A lot of times what I do is just take one hammer, lay it on the knuckle here, and take another one and smack it, and that'll free it up to the point to where it'll just come right off there. We'll just go ahead and remove the knuckle here and set it aside. And then we can go ahead and remove our lower A-arm. Just remove the bolt out of each A-arm tab. And we'll go ahead and cut our strap loose from our upper A-arm. Let it drop down. Remove our upper A-arm bolt. Our upper A-arm. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and remove our shock. We already have our hardware loosened up, so we're going to go ahead and remove the nut from the bolt and then remove the bolt. We'll set our shock aside for the time being. And then we're going to remove our tie rod from the rack and pinion. We already have our boot loose from earlier showing you the steering stops. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna go ahead and remove our inner ball and socket from the rack and pinion. You'll just use a big pair of channel locks to loosen the inner ball and socket from the rack and pinion. So once we've got our shock and tie rod removed, we'll go ahead and repeat the same steps for the opposite side, and now it's time to start installing our shock bracket. So now what we're gonna do is go ahead and grab our shock bracket, as well as 2 M12 bolt and nylock nut. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna slide this bracket through. The side with the cutouts like this, they're gonna be going up against the frame, so you wanna make sure that's facing upward. It's gonna be a pretty tight fit to get it through there. There will be a rubber flap installed on your machine on the passenger side that you'll have to remove. Ours has already been removed from the previous lift kit. So once you have it kind of slid to where it needs to be, just like this, it'll line up with your factory shock bolts. So something that I like to do whenever I'm trying to get the holes to line up, it's kind of tight in there, I usually take just a flathead screwdriver or any kind of screwdriver you can. It'll just help you kind of get everything lined up and in position. You'll have to work it quite a bit. It may need to go up or come down or go forward, go back. Looks like we might have it lined up here. So we got that side lined up. We'll just go ahead and start our bolt through. Go ahead and put our nut on it. Then we'll head over here to the opposite side and do the same thing. Get it lined up. You may have to use a rubber mallet just to kind of tap the bracket around to get it in position. That side's together there. Now once we have this bracket installed, we're just gonna go ahead and fully tighten our hardware. While the shock's not in the way or anything, it just makes it that much easier. So we'll fully tighten the hardware and then we'll get our shocks installed. Then we're just gonna go ahead and install our shock to the bracket here. This. Get our hardware started. And we'll just go ahead and fully tighten the hardware. And repeat that same step for the opposite side. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to apply some Loctite to the threads of our inner ball and socket provided in the kit. And we're just going to go ahead and thread it right into. We're just going to thread it right in. We'll get it in there as far as we can by hand. And we'll go ahead and grab our channel locks here. We'll go ahead and fully tighten it. And we'll go ahead and remove our jam nut off the threads of our inner ball and socket here. Grab the provided boot. We're just going to slide it over the inner ball and socket. Make sure it goes all the way up on there. Then once it is, we'll just take the provided zip tie, slide it over our boot, tighten that zip tie up, and then we'll just cut off the excess of our zip tie. So next we're just going to go ahead and thread our jam nut back onto our inner ball and socket here. We'll just thread it all the way up as far as it'll go. Just like that. And we'll grab our Z-bend tie rod provided in the kit. We'll go ahead and thread that on to our inner ball and socket. We'll just thread that on there. We're obviously gonna have to make some adjustments, so we'll just let it hang. So we went ahead and ordered a set of SuperATV heavy duty ball joints. You can absolutely utilize your factory ones, but today we're gonna go ahead and upgrade. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna find something that's larger than our ball joint for it to press through. We're gonna find something that fits on the top, just like that. We're gonna make sure we have it nice and centered, which we do. We're gonna go ahead and start pressing this ball joint in. Once we have our ball joint pressed in, we'll go all the way around and look. Make sure it's pressed in flat, and ours is. So we got our upper ball joint pressed in as well. Make sure you take a look around, make sure your snap ring groove is exposed. Ours is. So if you utilize the SuperATV ball joint, you'll realize there's no boot on this ball joint, so we'll have to install the boot as well as the snap ring. So the first thing we're gonna do is go ahead and put our snap ring on our lower ball joint. Just take a pair of snap ring pliers, slide it down there. Make sure it locks into the groove all the way around. That one looks good to go. So on the upper A-arm, I like to go ahead and put my snap ring on before I glue my ball joint boot on. Get it down on there a little bit and then just tap it down. Make sure it snaps. And go around and look at it, inspect it, make sure it's in the groove fully. Ours is. And now we're going to be using our glue to glue our ball joint on. Whenever you're using this glue, you want to make sure that you are using a pair of gloves as well. This stuff is very, very sticky, and it can be harmful to your skin as well. So we're going to go ahead and throw these gloves on. And we'll just go right around this groove here, this lip, where our ball joint's going to lay. And just put a nice, you don't even really have to squeeze the glue bottle. If you just kind of run it around there, it'll let out enough that it's going to stick. You want to kind of be quick too, because this stuff dries really fast. And then just stick your ball joint boot right down into place. Make sure it's fully seated all the way around. And just let it sit there. So now we're ready to get these A-arms installed to our machine. So we're going to grab our lower A-arm, cut the zip ties that are holding the bushings. Just like that. I like to make sure my pivot blocks will move just a little bit, especially one of them. That way we can get everything lined up how it needs to be. Sometimes you might take a little rubber mallet, just kind of tap it into position there. Tap it up to where it lines up so you can get your bolts in. Once it's lined up, we'll just take one of our bolts. Just like that. And then we're going to go ahead and replace our nylock nuts. I highly recommend doing that whenever you're doing any type of installation. That's one of the #1 reasons that a machine will come back apart. So we're going to go ahead and put some brand new nuts on here on our factory hardware. We'll get those started, and then we can go ahead and fully tighten them. So next thing we're going to do is go ahead and install our grease zerks. It's a lot easier to do it now than to wait until everything's installed. Let's go ahead and get them started in there. Take a ratchet or a wrench, just thread them all the way in. Just want to be careful not to over tighten them, because you can absolutely do that. Just run them up to where the head touches the pivot block. Then we're going to go ahead and grab our knuckle. Get it reinstalled. Just slide this right onto our ball joint here, on our lower ball joint. Just flip your brake line kind of out of the way. And then we'll grab the hardware So we'll have our flat washer, cotter pin, and lock nut. Flat washer will go first, and a lock nut. The way I like to do these, I like to give an extension and an impact, and I like to run the nut down all the way. Just makes it easier to do it now than to do it with a wrench. You'll have to apply some downward pressure on the ball joint, otherwise the stud will want to spin. So once we've done that, we'll go ahead and get our cotter pin. Get it lined up. Our cotter keyway there. A pair of side cuts. And if it angles like this, your stud does, you'll just have to kind of bend your cotter pins up as they come through. Just like that. And you'll just want to kind of fold them over just like you normally would. Try to get them as tight to that stud as you can. That way they don't want to rotate up and clip your boot or anything like that. So next we're going to go ahead and install our upper A-arm to our knuckle. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but I've came up with a trick that's going to help everybody out significantly. So with our lower ball joint attached to our knuckle, we're going to go ahead and take our upper A-arm, slide the ball joint down through the knuckle just like this. Just use one hand to kind of hold it. We'll slide our washer on and start our nut. And then wrenching this when it's on the machine is kind of a pain. So what I decided I like to do, makes it a little bit easier, is kind of let this A-arm hang down like this. And we're going to take our socket and our impact. We're just going to go ahead and tighten up this. We're going to go ahead and tighten this ball joint up like this instead of with a wrench. So again, you'll just want to kind of pull pressure down on your A-arm. Make sure you get it fully tightened. And that's a lot faster than having to sit there with a wrench and go back and forth. And we'll just install our cotter pin. That. Spin it away from itself. And now we're going to be ready to get our axle installed. I'm going to go ahead and cut the zip tie off my bushings though. That way we can put it all on there at once. So next we're going to go ahead and get our axle installed. I like to make sure that my C-clip is facing down towards the ground whenever I go to install an axle into this diff. I like to just kind of wiggle it, kind of move it up and down until I feel it catch a gear. Just like that. So now our axle's installed. I like to give it a couple tugs just to make sure it's fully seated in that diff. So now here's the part. It's easier to install your ball joints the way we did, but it also makes it just a little bit trickier to get everything to go together. You just drop your knuckle down. And get your axle to line up into your knuckle, just like that. And you'll just pick it up. Here's the part that's a little bit tricky. It's not terrible. You just got to get your upper A-arm lined up. There we go. So once you have it lined up, just go ahead and pop your bolt all the way through. Just like that. We'll go ahead and start our nut back here on our upper A-arm. And we'll just go ahead and we'll fully tighten the hardware. Next, we're going to go ahead and reinstall our hub. Pick up on your axle. slide it in position like that. Take your castle nut. Let's go ahead and install our castle nut there. Let's get it hand tight for now. We'll take our brake caliper. Go ahead and get it reinstalled. Get our bolts started. Then we're going to go ahead and reattach our shock. Just pick up on our A-arms. Slide the bolt through the shock mount there, just like that. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab our tapered stud, 2 of our castle nuts, 2 flat washers, 2 cotter pins, and our misalignment bushing. So our tapered stud is going to drop through our steering arm like this. Then on the bottom side we're going to place a washer, and then one of our nuts. So we'll just slide a washer on, and a nut. And up here on the top side, what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and attach our tie rod. I like to kind of adjust it around a little bit. I know that my rotor's pretty well straight right now, so I'm just going to kind of adjust it to where it slides on there without really having to move the rotor around too much. Just makes it easier for whenever we get a setting on the toe. Right about there. We'll drop our misalignment bushing down, a flat washer, and a nut. So we're going to take a 17mm socket and a 17mm wrench. We'll go ahead and fully tighten these. So now this tapered stud is actually fixed to the knuckle. So we're going to put our lower cotter pin in, but we're not going to put the cotter pin for the top, just because if we have to make any adjustments once we sit it down on the ground, we'll have to remove our actual tie rod end. So we'll go ahead and get our cotter pin installed on the bottom portion of our tapered stud. And then the next thing we're going to talk about is brake lines. So this machine was already equipped with a 6-inch lift kit previously, so we've already swapped to the longer lines. Changing the brake lines on this machine is pretty easy. The only thing you'd have to do is there's a clip right here, this clip. You'd have to remove that. That just pulls up. You can take a pair of pliers, pull it up, and then you're going to have your brake line fitting where it threads into the SuperATV line or the factory line, which would be on it. You just unscrew it, and then you're going to attach the SuperATV lines, and you'll do that all the way around the machine. It's pretty simple. Like I said, we already have our lines attached, so we're not going to be doing that today. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and tighten our castle nut, tighten our brake caliper hardware, shock bolts, and then we're going to show you how to attach your brake line to your A-arm. So we're going to go ahead and take our brake line clip, slide it over the brake line, grab one of our Allen headed screws. I'm just going to go ahead and thread the screw right into the A-arm here. Tighten the hardware up a little bit. Then you can just go ahead and repeat all the steps for the opposite side, and then we're going to head to the rear. So the first thing you'll want to do is go ahead and remove the rear tires from your machine. We've already went through and loosened up our hardware just for demonstration purposes. So the first thing we're going to do is remove our cotter pin from our castle nut, then the castle nut. Then we'll go over here and we'll remove our brake caliper by removing the 2 bolts. Grab your caliper, wiggle it off, just take it, set it up out of the way for the time being. Well, the next thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and remove our hardware for our shock from the lower A-arm. Then our sway bar link hardware. off the A-arm. We'll pick up on the A-arm here. Pull our shock bolt out. Pick up on the A-arm enough to get our sway bar link removed. Our A-arms drop. Then we'll grab a ratchet strap and we'll tie our shock up out of the way. And then you'll want to remove your brake line hardware from the brake line, connecting it to the upper A-arm. I've already done this. So we'll go ahead and we'll remove the hardware that attaches to our knuckle from our upper A-arm, as well as our lower A-arm. Just pick up on your A-arm. We're going to go ahead and remove the lower hardware first. That'll allow the lower A-arm to drop. Then we'll pick up on the upper, remove the hardware from the knuckle, and make sure you don't let your axle completely drop. And you'll just pick up on your A-arm here. Use the shock to kind of hold it. And you'll just plunge your axle in, pull it out, just like that. We'll go ahead and remove our lower A-arm hardware. Remove the bolts in your A-arm. And we'll come up here to our upper A-arm hardware. Remove it. Remove the upper A-arm. The next step is going to be to remove the shock from the rear of the machine. We'll set it aside. Then we'll grab our shock bracket. We'll go ahead and grab 2 of the provided M12 bolts. Once we have both of our bolts started, we're going to go ahead and start our nuts. We'll go ahead and fully tighten the hardware. Next, we're going to go ahead and reattach our shock. Again, back here in the rear, I went ahead and got some new nylock nuts. The reinstallation. So we have our nuts started. We'll go ahead, fully tighten the hardware. So now we're going to go ahead and cut our zip ties off of our rear A-arm bushings. We'll go ahead and get our A-arms installed. We'll go ahead and get our nuts installed. Once we have the nuts on, we'll go ahead and fully tighten the hardware, and then we're going to install our grease zerks. So we're going to take our straight zerk and we're going to install it into our pivot blocks on our lower A-arm, just like we did in the front. Go ahead and fully tighten them, and then repeat the step for the opposite pivot block. So now we're going to go ahead and attach our knuckle to our lower A-arm. Let's go ahead and get our nuts started on there. Then we're gonna grab our axle. We're gonna go ahead and get it installed to the diff. Make sure our C-clip is facing down. We're just gonna go ahead and get it installed into the diff. Again, just slide it around. Give it a couple tugs, make sure it's in there. And then what we're gonna do, just gonna let it lay here on our sway bar linkage. We're gonna grab our upper A-arm, get it installed. Let's go ahead and cut the zip ties off again. Slide it into position. Right there. Let's go ahead and start our nuts. We'll go ahead, grab our knuckle. Slide the axle into the knuckle. We're gonna make sure that we have both of our bushing caps on. Grab our upper A-arm bolt. Now we're gonna go ahead and install our upper A-arm to our knuckle. Then install the bolt, just like that. We'll go ahead and reinstall our nut. Then we're going to go ahead and reinstall our sway bar link. Then we'll make sure that our brake line is running over here like this. And we'll go ahead and install our shock. We'll grab our hub. Then our brake caliper. We'll use our factory brake caliper bolts here. Then we're going to go ahead and grab our provided brake line clips as well as the hardware. We'll go ahead and slide our brake line clip onto our brake line. Grab one of our Allen headed screws. Then we'll just continue doing this for the rest of the brake line holes. We'll make sure all our hardware is fully tightened and then repeat all these steps for the opposite side. So we've got our lift kit installed. We're running a set of 32 intimidators on this setup. Now obviously every machine's gonna vary for the camber and the toe, depending upon what tire size, what other accessories you're running on your machine. But that's how super easy it is. Install SuperATV's 6-inch lift kit on this Honda Pioneer 1000. For more information on this lift kit or any of SuperATV's great products, feel free to give us a call at 855-743-3427 or check us out online at superatv.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.